Why is it important for African Americans to read African American science fiction and fantasy? The main reason why it's important for African Americans to read African American science fiction and fantasy is so that you start to see yourself in the world. You read mainstream science fiction and fantasy, most of the characters are usually white and they're usually male, and usually the supporting cast is aliens, but there are usually, oftentimes, no African Americans at all in the books, or usually in the movies, or put down to an ancillary token role. But in African American science fiction and fantasy, we ourselves are put at the forefront. We're the main characters, and we are the primary focus of the story. When young black children start seeing themselves, when they start reading these type of stories, they start seeing themselves as the main character in the story, and they start seeing themselves as part of a world. Um, that's one of the main reasons why you should always try to give your children African American fiction, science fiction, and African American fantasy, because they have to see themselves in the world, and they have to see themselves as part of the future world, um, and the past world as well. They have to see themselves as part of the past and the future, because with science fiction, usually it's futuristic, and you start seeing yourself as part of the future, as having a part of society, and with fantasy, like the ISIS series that I produce right now, you start seeing yourself in the past and in the present as being a part of the world and making a contribution in the world. When African American kids start reading these type of stories, it opens up their imagination and allows them to see people like them in the world doing things and being a part of society. Um, African American fantasy and fiction is I say it's paramount. I grew up in a world of comic books and TV shows, like Transformers, He-Man, She-Ra, um, and all these fantasy worlds. They always featured white characters and mostly white male characters, but the African American characters were a token. And that's one of the reasons why, when I started writing in the late 1990s, I wanted to make sure that I put fantasy characters that were African American at the forefront, because it's very rare that you see African American fantasy characters as heroes, as lead heroes. How many years of Star Trek did we get before we got Jake Sisko? And we haven't seen another character like that in almost 20 years. Um, and if you look at comic books, most of the black characters are side characters. Very rarely do they become main characters. And African American kids, as I see it, they really need to start reading this type of fiction, genre fiction, because it opens up their imaginations and it allows them to see somebody like them, who looks like them, um, in the story, having fantastic adventures like the characters they see in many other fictions, like Star Wars or Batman or whatever have you. When we start seeing ourselves in these type of roles, we start wanting to be these type of people. We start trying to aspire to get these type of careers in things like math, science, engineering, technology, because that's one of the reasons why I think a lot of African Americans don't participate in these fields, because they don't see themselves solving these type of problems in television shows and in movies and in books. And when you don't see yourself in that type of role, the last time I saw somebody like that was Geordie LaForge on Star Trek, Next Generation. But we rarely ever see that kind of guy, having those type of adventures. Never a black person having that type of adventures. Um, and that type of storytelling is one of the big genres out there, and African Americans, we're not being a part of it, because we are a part of it because there are fantasy and fiction books, but a lot of us don't acknowledge them, and a lot of us don't see them. But they are on Amazon. I've seen quite a few of them. And they're good stories. I write and publish in this fantasy genre, and part of that reason why I did that is because I wanted African American girls to have their own heroine, and I wanted them to see themselves as being a part of history and being a part of society. Um, and that was one of the reasons why I did the ISIS series, because I wanted little girls to see that there were black gods, and there was Egyptian mythology was black, and that all the characters in Egyptian mythology were black. and that it was shared with Nubian culture, because Egypt and Nubia were brother and sister countries. And I wanted people to understand that. I wanted black kids to understand that they have a culture and they have a history. And many African Americans, we don't look at this genre as something black. We always think about it as a white genre, but it's not a white genre. It's a it can be a black genre. And there are a lot of writers out there, and I think African Americans, we really need to start letting our kids start sharing these books with our kids, because these are the kind of books that open up a kid's imagination and show them a different world, a world where they are included, where they are the main character, where our stories are told and our experiences are presented in these in a fantasy situation. Um, Many African Americans, we have to start. Really have to start reading, showing our kids these kind of books, because they can have a huge impact on a child's life and a child's future. And the book that you read at at 8 or 9, I won't say 6 or 7, because a lot of the books that I publish, I would say about you would start. I could say you could start reading them about 8, maybe 9 years old, or maybe even 10 years old. But these type of books at that age can have an impact on what a child wants to be in the next 15 or 20 years after when they go to college or when they go to high school, what type of careers they want to aspire to. Because when they see one of their favorite characters in science or in computers or studying African history, they may want to take that as a major in college, or they may want to pursue that as a career. But um, we have to start reading these. We have to start showing our kids these kind of books. And I'm as a publisher of these kind of books, I really want to see more African Americans reading these type of stories, because it's very important for black kids to open up their imaginations. Because if you open up your imagination, then you can start seeing yourself in different roles and in different careers and doing different things. Um, and we really need more African Americans in, especially the sciences and mathematics and engineering and IT. We really need more African, and we really need more stories like that. And one of the things I want to do is try to do more type of stories like that. And I want to see more African Americans reading these type of stories. That's all I have to say for this video. Please let your kids read African American science fiction and fantasy. There are dozens of titles on Amazon, including my ISIS series. The books are low priced. They're good reading, and you're gonna have a lot of fun reading them. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.